Hello, my name's Noel Grerory.
And I'm Bryn Davies.
And we're here in sunny Spain in a little village where I live in called Bedar in Almeria. And we're looking for a composition, aren't we, Paul?
We're looking for a suitable subject to paint in this beautiful place.
Yeah.
Noel will be working in oils and I'll be working in watercolour.
What about this, Paul? This is Audrey's door. And we've got everything we want.
Looks good.
Shade.
Painted flowers.
Nice light coming through. So plenty of tone one side and light the other.
Yeah, good sharp shadow showing
What
the
do you think?
Mediterranean sunlight. I think
We'll do
that'd be
that.
good.
I think we'll do that.
So we'll settle on that one?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
In order to start this, you need to put something on the canvas. I mean, it's a large, or fairly large, empty space at the moment, and a bit frightening and daunting to most people. So, in order to start anything, I can do it in a way that Paul can never do it with watercolours. I can make huge mistakes with what I'm doing, but at least something can end up on the canvas. So I'm using quite a large brush here, and a bit of indigo and a bit of red. Could be any colour. The first line to do, I think, is this line here. This divides the picture, so you've got one side looking up the corridor there, and the rest of the doorway there. Now, I've looked at that as a line, and I think it's probably wrong, so we'll put it here. Now, you can never do this with watercolour. This angle here, I don't know if you can see this angle here of where the window is. It comes down, so in order to get that, I need to look at the angle of it, get my brush to that angle, move it with one eye closed, move it to the angle there, and put it onto there. I've actually got it right, but that's only because I've been painting for a long time. But when you first start, it's very often misleading what angles are. So you've got that angle there, this comes down, the window ends there, the side of the building comes there.
Right, Noel's outlined to you how unforgiving watercolour can be. By that, it's a beautiful medium to use, but there's no room for mistakes, i.e. we can't layer paint over different colours over, unless it's in a very simple wash form, and we can't afford to do the looseness with our brush that Noel did starting off there. So for that reason, I always start mine with the pencil, but I need to get the perspective right. So we're going to just run a line down here. Now I'm not going to worry too much about this, as Noel didn't, because if the pencil lines show through the paint, that can often enhance the drawing or the painting, the watercolour. So this is the line across the bottom of the steps I'll take, very loosely drawn in. Now I'm thinking about my perspective, and as we're looking uphill, we need to get the perspective right. The eye level, therefore, where the vanishing point appears, which is where the lines of perspective of the building go down, needs to be actually higher than my head, whereas normally my eye level on the flat would be in line with my eyes, okay? So, for that reason, my eye level is higher. It's somewhere up here with those top steps that you can see up through the top there. So I'm just going to roughly sketch those in. And I just sort of stop around here. And then we'll just put an indication of this wall down here. Not too much. And there are some trees you can see. I actually can't see them from where at my vantage point, but there are some trees, so I'll move those over to make the view through the alleyway that more interesting. So they'll be in here somewhere, okay? Then from them we'll just strike a line. The steps are quite steep, and I'm doing this much like Noel did, but obviously using the pencil instead of the brush. But I'm going very, very softly with the pencil because I don't want it to overpower the painting when I get to colour. So I'm going to concentrate on the doorway, sort of around here, this sort of shape of the paintwork around the door, then the door inset inside of there. Okay. Then we've got the window directly above it, again with a blue area that we'll wash in.
To take the painting further from this very crude start, I need to work out where things are and sort out some of these things because they're very muddled. So what I've mixed up is ultramarine blue and a bit of white, and we'll put in the sky here. I think we'll need more terps on that. We'll put in the sky here. Lovely, I love all this. This is just what painting's about. Scrubbing in paint, moving around, making this wonderful noise. Oh, it's a bit blue. Never mind, we can cover that over easy enough. Right, we've also got some blue in the window itself, so you've got this, we'll redraw these shapes a bit like this. That's the outside part of the window there, and we've got to relate it to the door, which comes here, and it's slightly bigger. The door's slightly bigger than the window, so must come down there. That comes across there, that comes down there. So already we're knowing a better position where the door comes.
So I'm going to sketch the sky in colour, much as Noel did. So to get this lovely, as I said earlier, blue Mediterranean sky, so rich and deep, which I'm not really used to. Living in the UK, more used to painting grey skies. Just run the paint in here. Now I'm going to have to work quite quickly because paint in this heat dries very quickly. Now what I've done is got almost the blue I want, but wet in wet, which is a technique I'm using here, I'm adding to strengthen the blue, for the blue at the top there. Because the one thing I don't want to do is paint over this again, because by doubling up on the colour it starts to look laboured and looks very clumsy. Now what I'm doing is just rinsing out my brush, and wet in wet I'm just going to soften that, because as the sky goes down to the horizon, or as far as I can see, obviously the colour will lose its intensity. So I've got virtually clean water and I'm just running that in to this blue that I've used.
We've got a dark area here, a window there, see, and another window there. So that starts to look like a window up there, and a very dark door, which comes there and down here. That gives me a position where that ought to be. I think that's pretty good. The door itself it ends about there, and the top of the on the top of the stairs there. You know, it's amazing how when you ever start anything and you're filming anything, it's always somebody coming along and making a noise. We've now got somebody drilling next door. It could go on for all day, I don't know. But the best story I can tell you on this is I was painting a very similar view in Bedar about 5 or 6 years ago. And the building had to be between 300 and 400 years old. And I started it one day. I came in the next day and there was a JCB right stuck in the front of it. I said, "Oi, what are you doing?" He said, "We're pulling it down." It had been there, as I said, for 300 to 400 years. And the day I'm painting it, they decided to pull it down. So life is never straightforward. Now I've got to this stage. It's still incredibly crude, of course it is, but I'm now beginning to look at where things ought to be. So while I've been doing that, you've been painting a bit, Paul, and how are you getting on? Is it all right? I mean,
yeah, okay, well, I'm just going over, you see this lovely blue sort of framework that's been painted around the windows there with the deeper blue window frames. So I'm going to do a light wash of intense blue. This is probably 5 parts water to 1 part colour. And using my piece of paper to keep the painting clean, I'm just going to run the colour over. Now this isn't drying quite as quickly as I thought it would in this heat, but I'm having to, this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, where I have to get it more or less right first time. I don't have a lot of room for error here, this needs to work. So these are going to be the frameworks around the white of the building. Now the difference between using watercolour, apart from the obvious difference between Noel and myself, is that I need to show this building really white. Noel will be putting the whites back in on his painting, whereas I'm using the white of the paper to be the brilliant white that these lovely cottages are whitewashed. It looks about right. I'm going to just kind of flood it on there. I'm not, you see, I'm going, unlike Noel, who can freely paint over everything, I'm going to kind of roughly have to paint around all my various. Now we've got this wall that sort of drops down. As I said, we're kind of on a slope, so my vanishing point's up there, so it comes sort of somewhere here. Now what I've done here, you see, this is a not finished paper, which means it's rough finished, and this is quite nice when you use a brush like this and go over it and almost show the white coming through of the paper. So what we'll do here is just wet my brush, and I'm just going to kind of not fuss over it, but because this I'll be painting the stones over, and we'll just sort of bring that in and just let that fall away. And there's my basic wash for the groundwork there. Okay, so we'll see a little bit more of Noel sloshing around in his mud.
Around?
And then we get back to me for this cleaner part of the job. Okay.
This is actually probably too small, so I've got to make it slightly bigger. Actually, when I was in art school, we never really learnt to do watercolours because they weren't really considered to be painting.
Excuse me?
But we never did. And when I did actually learn watercolours...
He could be so spiteful.
Oh yeah, spiteful cutting, yes, right. When I actually learnt watercolour, I realised how incredibly difficult it was, because you...
Don't mind your brush on the white trousers, not please.
Really?
Yeah.
What, you're for wearing white trousers?
Paint
Well, you should have worn proper clothes for painting, mucking about in white trousers, just showing off one day of sunbathing.
Well, I do come from the UK.
Oh, that's right. Not used to sun, are you, really?
That's right. I'd have my overcoat on at this time.
Is that right?
Yeah. You know, sort of need to get...
Well, one of the reasons why we're painting actually physically in the mornings only is in the afternoon this is an entirely different picture. I mean, the afternoon, it's not only this side is light and that side is dark. It makes it too complicated. We need to find out what parts are light and which parts are dark in order to make it interesting. Otherwise, you muddle yourself.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I like painting from photographic references or sketch references is that the fact that everything's dead the same. There's no difference.
Yeah.
So we just really can't paint in the afternoon because it is too different.
Noel and I were talking about the shadows earlier on, how the sun is moving over. When we started, the shadow ran from this building across that doorway diagonally, and then part of this wall was in shadow. So as you can see now, the shadow is dispersed and sort of is going down the steps. But that's quite a nice thing because you've got that nice staggered arrangement. So what I'll do now is, before that shadow completely disappears, I'm going to sort of quickly mop that in, and then we'll get back to Noel because I have to wait for this to dry each time. Okay. So for that shadow, what I'm going to do is, as you look at it, it looks quite against the white. It looks as though we should be using grey. Well, I will be using grey, but I'll be mixing a dioxazine violet with it, a beautiful colour, similar to the base colour Noel's used here, you see.
I can't use that because I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, well, because you ain't posh like
Well,
me.
dioxazine. Oh, marvellous name.
Yeah, I love it. So you can see now already how that shadow has moved over just in the time we've been talking. So I'm going to continue to put a wash over here of the dioxazine violet over the wash I did underneath for the the mortar work rather in the path. Now the reason for that is because I'll get that intensity then. It might have seemed a waste to have spent that time washing it over but I need it to the one colour to dry over the other to give it an intensity for the shadow. Now this is nice and dry now, so I'll be painting wet onto dry. Okay, just run this in here using the broad brush. Getting wet, but it's drying so incredibly quickly in the sunlight. It's not an easy thing to do. This again gets back to the immediacy of watercolour. But again, I don't have to worry too much because I'm going to be drawing all the paving stones over the top. Okay. Over to you, Noel.
Really? This needs to be redrawn in a much more correct way, and you can just go over the top. It's lovely. That finishes there. The door comes down there, and what I'm doing now is just literally going to spend an hour, perhaps slightly less, redrawing where the things are. This door has a doorknob there. It's got a window there. It's got these lovely series of dots where the studs of the door are. There's more studs going across here. Right, so
are you using? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
Are you using mixture of linseed oil and turpentine?
Oh yeah, well, I put it together. It's actually
okay.
together. You know, that's why it's slopping about all over the place. So what I'm going to do now is just literally draw everything I want to do in the right place. The flowers, the bowl, the steps, and roughly what a cats I really want, so they look like a bit more like cats.
So you're mapping out your final composition now at this stage?
Absolutely, Paul. Mapping it out. So.
Yeah.
Right. Audrey's got lots of cats, and in order to make it look like Audrey's house, we've got to add some cats to it. Before I put some sort of scribble there and a scribble there and say, right, this is where the cats are going to go. So I don't have the information. There's no cats around. They're too frightened of me. But I do have a photograph of a cat in the doorway, and I've got a cat here that belongs to Audrey, and we'll stick it there.
Kind of reflection above as we look into that bedroom window. But what I'll do is put the Payne's grey in. Possibly later on we'll touch a little bit of black in there. Now I've just rinsed my brush and I'm just going to soften the edge. With just clean water. Now what I should have here is a little bit of rag ideally to take away the surplus water. Now I'm just going to run that down to the bottom of that top window, and what I'll do is just touch a little bit of blue into that to denote the reflection of the sky, of the grey. So I'll speed this up because Noel's getting a little bit anxious before the drill starts up to get going.
Absolutely.
So there we go. It's perhaps a little bit weak. So, but I can always come and revisit this when, if the final dried colour, because obviously it will dry out at a lighter tone than when it's shown wet. But I can revisit this and strengthen the grey. So I'm still using the Payne's grey. I've washed my brush out, take some of the surplus water off, and I've just added clean water in there, because as we're looking into the doorway, the heaviest part of the shadows inside the door will be towards the ceiling area. You can do kind of, well, not really the same thing, but a kind of effect where at this stage I'm not too bothered how accurate this is, because the part that I enjoy most is when I come back and then have a look at it and then think, right, this is where I can model it by putting some darker tones here and there to really give it, hopefully bring it to life. I'll carry on doing these to save time, but you can see the simple I'm not fussing over them, I'm just sort of letting them almost, well, we have a few cascading over the side of the pot.
Cascading.
Big word. I looked that up, especially to, I've been planning to use that word.
Oh, cascading, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good word actually. Yeah.
And I also learnt the word plethora. So we're going to have a plethora of leaves. A plethora of cascading leaves.
Why not?
Okay. So we're just going to sketch those in, and I'll carry on with that. And then over to Noel sloshing around in his swamp again.
I want to actually show that the sun is coming somewhere down like that, and the rest, this is dark and this is very light. It'll just give it a huge punch. So now we've got the start of a sunshine area. This I've got to work out how that would go, and unfortunately the sun's not out so I can't tell, but this will all be flooded with light and this will all be flooded with dark.
For that drilling to go on next door, just to put you off your stroke. So what I'm moving over, I'm still doing the foliage around in the plant pots and around that, but I've around the doorway, but I've changed to a smaller brush. And what this gives me is just to touch here and there some of these very, very fine leaves that you see at the top here, a smaller brush. And you see I've left white areas for where the yellow flowers will be. I can simply touch the yellow in there, and the same with the red and the purple, etc. So just touching greens. We've got a few kind of. Now the difference, as I explained earlier, between Noel's painting and mine, he has to put the whites back in, but I'm using the white of the paper for my whites, so I haven't worried obviously about the basics of the house. I want that to appear as a brilliant white.
What amazes me is that the difference between watercolor and oils is so different that you wouldn't have to bother with oils like that. You just literally splash it around, and move it around, and you know that's whatever you do is now finished. You can't muck about with it. You can't add more to it.
No, that's it. It's immediate. It has to be kind of right first time.
No.
Because if I were to overlay that, it would start to look really laboured.
You would look laboured. And I can do as many times as I want.
Yeah.
That's why I love oil paintings, and I've never really mastered watercolour.
A lot of people hate watercolour for that reason. They feel that they can't make a mistake.
But why are so many people painting in watercolour?
Well, I think it's the convenience of it, to be honest. Yeah, I really do. It's the convenience. But once you do get the knack of realising that you have to make it work first time, I think you kind of expect that, and so you just try and make sure you get it.
Paul and I have decided that because it's going to take a long time, nobody really wants to see hours and hours of working in detail. What we decided to do, we're going to try to finish one area. This is just sketched in this window, and Paul has done the same.
Okay. So these are very handy little tool, maul sticks, something you could make yourself, or you could buy relatively inexpensively.
Well, first get a dead mole, don't you?
Eh?
You first find a dead mole.
Get a dead mole. Not a mole, you fool.
Oh, sorry.
A mole.
Mole stick, isn't it? It's a mole stick, isn't it?
It's a
used
mole
for sign
stick.
writing, basically, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah, originally it was a sign writer's
Yes,
tool.
right. How can you see that bottom bit?
I wish you wouldn't point out to the viewers my mistakes.
It isn't right, is it?
It isn't right.
Oh, either mine's right or yours is right.
He's always trouble to work with, and he always finds the faults. Viewers, you might not have even seen that if he hadn't pointed it out.
But he is, isn't it?
But I will be able to alter that with a little bit of gouache, I think, later. But he's right. It's a total mistake.
Him and his gouache. He loves it.
Okay, we'll come back to that. And so we're just going to drop those in. When that is dry, what I'll do is use a stronger mix and just kind of tickle it.
unlike watercolor, I don't have to spend hours and hours drawing and get it, because I can just carry on indefinitely painting on top of it. So what Paul and I are going to do now is do a couple of pots together, and keep it to sort of get it to a certain stage where the rest of it can be brought up to that stage. A bit like the cats, you know, we'll bring up this pot here and these pots here. We'll bring up to the stage that cats look like. So I'll start doing that. I've got some indigo here with a bit of white in it, I think, and we'll have to get that different from that. Right, we've got a light area across here. Bit of red in that, I think. Bit too. That's probably a bit better. Right, we've got it. That's lovely. And we'll put a bit of red there. Here. That'll be right. I can. And then what I want to do then is to get everything up to this kind of standard, and then tomorrow we'll just do one or two fine details and finish the painting. But if we can now start to get this kind of quality working and bring it all together, and that'll take hours, but tomorrow we'll have something really worth looking at.
Now I'm painting the same terracotta pot with the geraniums in to the left of the door. I've used light red and a touch of raw sienna mixed together to get a nice terracotta colour. So what I've done there is I've laid on the basic colour, but I'm also lifting out some of the colour I've put in. Now that is because, getting back to our light source, which I know is something I keep rambling on.
Paul and I have just spent an afternoon working our pictures up from a photograph, because the light source was different in the afternoon, it was in the morning. So we've now got it, both of us have got it to a stage where there's little more to do, but where do you stop? And stopping is probably as hard than actually starting. So I'm going to just do a little bit more drawing on this, and I'm going to link this dark area with this light area with a bit of green on here, a little light green, just to bring it across, so it's linking this bit, and it just gives it a better joining, if you like. I'm quite happy with the flowers, I'm quite happy with the cats, I like the light source coming through, but just a bit more work on it and we'll call it a day. And over to you, Paul, see how you're getting on.
I've done much the same, spent half an afternoon in the studio rather, working this up simply to sort of shorten the length of time. Now, what I've largely done, you'll probably notice from my original painting, having said on there that it's very difficult to overwork watercolour, I felt that the sky that I'd painted in was much too insipid. So all I've really done there is laid the board flat, used a number 6 or 8 brush, and I've overlaid a wash of cerulean blue with a touch of intense blue, just to give it that lovely rich Mediterranean sky. I've also intensified the shadows with that same mix that we used the other day of the dioxazine violet with some Payne's grey, and that was just by doing that it's intensified the light. And as you can see with, well, perhaps not today because it's a little dull, but the intensity of the light here brings out the colours. So I'm never a little bit shy about putting splashes of colour almost straight out of the tube. So I'll just quickly go over what I've done here. I've used the same colours as on the top window, which I completely screwed up the other day, and in terms of the window frame. And I've also used the same colour here, an intense blue wash, overlaid with dioxazine violet shadows. We'll come to I've used a brush ruling method to put the planks, to define the planks in the door, and that's something a little later on I'll show you how to do. I've just used a Scarlet Lake in Artist Professional colours because the pigments are much stronger and more vivid, and I've used those literally unmixed from the tube, very much thicker mix, probably 2 of water and 1 of paint, and in some cases one of water, one of paint. I've used a rose carmine here and a gamboge yellow on the yellows here, and I'll come back to this a little later, but some of the darker areas underneath the foliage I've mixed with a strong mix of intense blue and viridian. So that's kind of up to it to now. I'll pass you back to Noel, and then when we come back I'll show you a simple way of getting this brush ruling to get some straight lines with your fine brush. Okay, over to Noel.
When you're doing something as complicated as that, I could spend hours on it. Don't need to, because the rest of it's very loose. Right. Got an area there. Nothing more than just a few blobs of paint to denote a bit of pattern, and that's all. No real effort necessary, but just to help their eye works out some things. Right, there's that. Interesting part about painting watercolours and oils is the fact the more I put on this painting, the more oil I put on, the more work I put into it, it gets much more interesting and more detail, obviously. When you come to painting watercolours, it's the other way around. The more you put on the watercolour, the more you add to it on top of what you existing paint, the messier and the dirtier and the more overworked it looks. So it is that different to work with the two mediums. So what I'm going to do now, finish it off. I'm quite happy with the way it's come. It's very loose, but it still represents what I can see in front of me. Just going to put one or two leaves in sort of lemon yellow, just flicking on the odd bit, just to sort of feel that the sun's coming through and linking. There we are, just a few marks, a bit more, perhaps a bit more, just to see what we're doing before we go mad. And I think that's all I need to do.
Is you're probably better doing this on a flat plane. So you simply place the ruler at between 45 and 60 degrees to the paper, load your brush and just strike the line, you see. So that is, I used exactly the same method to draw these joins in this sort of tongue and grooved finished door. So that's how I did those. I used the same method for striking the lines through these ornate tiles on the steps, and we can also kind of use it if I wanted to just sort of get it fairly straight, just to intensify that line. I think probably covered everything there, so you can see the colours are very vibrant, but that's exactly what I wanted for this intensity of light in this part of the world. So I think that just covers everything. Right, thank you for watching. We do really hope you've learned something, at least a little about oil painting and just as much about watercolour painting. And so we're off to the local tapas bar for a well-earned rioja, and so hopefully we'll catch up with you next time. Oh, by the way, you didn't believe all that impoverished artist stuff, did you, on the broken down scooter and stuff? Okay, see you next time.